listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, the eating disorder that affects thousands of Australians but often goes miss or undiagnosed. We find out what avoidant restrictive food intake disorder is and unpack the best way to treat it. Those details in just a moment. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Friday, the 5th of September. Neo-Nazi leader Thomas Sewell has been denied bail after allegedly leading a violent attack on a First Nations camp in Melbourne last weekend. The 32-year-old appeared in Melbourne Magistrates Court today, where the magistrate found he posed an ongoing danger to the community if released. Sewell is accused of directing around 30 men to storm Camp Sovereignty on Sunday. The court heard he allegedly punched and kicked one of the occupants during the attack. He is facing a number of charges, including violent disorder and affray. Two other men, aged 20 and 23, have also been charged but were granted bail. Another major payday for former Qantas boss Alan Joyce. The former CEO has pocketed $3.8 million worth of shares under a long-term incentive plan that survived a board move last year to slash his pay. The payout comes as Joyce's successor, Vanessa Hudson, saw her own salary increase 44% to $6.3 million, according to the latest annual report from Qantas. More than 1,000 people have gathered to farewell one of the two police officers killed in last week's Porepunkah shooting in regional Victoria. Senior Constable Vadim de Vart Hotar, a 34-year-old Belgian national, was laid to rest this morning at the Victoria Police Academy in Glen Waverley. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen and senior police from across the country were among the many mourners to pay their respects. The senior constable's brother also delivering an emotional tribute.
My brother, the hero. I could spend hours speaking about my brother, about the wonderful person he is, about all the amazing times we had together. But I'm going to keep this short because I'm not sure I would be able to get through it without breaking down.
A funeral for Detective Senior Constable Neil Thompson, who was also shot dead at a rural Victorian property last month, will be held on Monday. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, or ARFID, with Dr. Sarah Trobe, a clinical psychologist and eating disorders expert. As Sarah explains, the disorder is often misunderstood, causing enormous challenges for thousands of people and their loved ones. And a warning, this following interview contains themes around eating disorders. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us about this new eating disorder. It's called ARFID. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, Natasha. ARFID stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. And we're still saying it's new, but it was introduced in the DSM, which is how we use or diagnose mental health conditions, back in 2013. So whilst it has been around a while, it is still increasing in understanding in society and community and developing treatment pathways.
So what are the key symptoms here? I think it's fabulous that we're starting to be able to help people that may suffer from this disorder to identify that they're not alone and there is great treatment and care available. So explain to us what the symptoms are.
Yeah, absolutely. So ARFID is characterised by an avoidance or an aversion to food. So it's not driven by body image concerns, which we can see in other types of eating disorders, but it's driven by one or more of these three things. So it can be driven by a lack of interest or enjoyment in food. So an actual, just not a desire. They don't feel a hunger or a desire to eat food that most people would. There might be an aversion to particular sensory characteristics. So how the food actually feels in your mouth or tastes in your mouth or smells. And so that aversion actually leads to restriction. And or the person might have an anxiety or phobia around food. So that might be a result of a serious choking incident or food poisoning. And then the anxiety around that also then leads to the aversion.
So what percentage of these people would have, for example, allergies to food? Would that be also a predisposition to say, look, I've had a bad experience, we know allergies are on the increase, and therefore they're super cautious about exploring new foods or actually enjoying food?
That's an excellent question, Natarsha. And you've gone straight into what might be actually precipitating or what might trigger an anxiety or a phobia to food. So yes, allergies can absolutely lead to the development of ARFID in that subtype where there is that phobia or anxiety around food, because they might have had a really negative experience with a food that caused the allergic reaction. Because ARFID is relatively new, we don't have lots and lots of research. So I couldn't tell you the prevalence of how many people with ARFID would have an allergy to particular foods, but it is definitely can be present.
And what about also its correlation between those that may be on the spectrum, whether they've been officially diagnosed or not because of the texture issue? Is that related at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So all eating disorders can co-occur with other health and mental health conditions. We do see a higher co-occurrence of neurodivergence and ARFID, particularly those that are autistic or ADHD. So in terms of the overlap or prevalence of people with ARFID that are also autistic, between 16 to 25% is the data that we have, and fairly similar for ADHD as well. So we don't understand the specific neural underpinnings of why that's the case, but absolutely we can see that sensory aversion can lead to the development of ARFID.
Labels can be confusing for all different reasons for so many people, Sarah. From your professional advice, why is it important that people who are suffering these issues or finding it challenging are firstly diagnosed and that they get adequate support and also care?
Yeah. Eating disorders have a huge impact on people's physical health, their mental health, their general well-being, their ability to go about their daily lives. So by having a full understanding of a person's experience and knowing that there are treatment pathways and cares available, that means we can support people to have a reasonably good relationship with food and body and be able to go out to those social situations which might involve food and ensure that a person is able to nourish their body in the way that we can. What it doesn't mean is that people need to be able to eat every food under the sun. You know, I don't eat every food under the sun, but we've just got to make sure that people can meet the nutritional requirements that our body needs. And ARFID, regardless of which driving factor it might be, is stopping that from happening for that person.
We know right now, Sarah, for all different reasons, it's one, very, very expensive to see a GP or a specialist or to get a diagnosis from an expert. But also it's incredibly hard to get into. We know there are big waiting lists. So what would your advice be to people who are listening, thinking, A, they might be concerned for themselves or someone they know? What should they do and where can they get help that is affordable and also easy to access?
We know that there's a lot of mental health concerns happening across Australia at the moment, and there can be difficulties in getting the care you need. The first place to start is a GP. Because of ARFID, the impact that it has on your body, a GP's immediate response in being able to assess and do blood tests and just see that the restriction of food types and amount isn't having a significant impact on the physical body. So those supplements and things could be started quite early. Multidisciplinary care is really important with ARFID. That means that we have a number of professionals that are able to address the impacts that eating disorder is having on the person. So we talk about a GP, absolutely, to make sure the physical body as well. A dietitian is also really important. Under Medicare, there is something called a chronic disease management plan in which people can access 5 sessions with a dietitian. I know 5 sessions isn't everything, but it's a good starting point. A referral to a mental health practitioner is also really important, and that can happen under a mental health care plan under MBS as well. Other professionals that might be involved are speech pathology around eating and feeding and chewing and those sorts of things in the mouth. And occupational therapy can also be really helpful for the sensory aversions. Now, that might feel really overwhelming, but we just have to be thinking about what are the driving factors behind the ARFID and what do we need to be addressing. The public mental health system is building capacity. So for young people, some public mental health or CAM services are equipped to respond to eating disorders. It's not everywhere, but again, having the conversation starting there is really good start. The other thing to keep in mind is support for the family. So we've got really wonderful free supports for family through Eating Disorders Families Australia, through the Butterfly Foundation, in Queensland and Victoria. So accessing peer support, talking to people that have gone through this in a similar way can really help to create behaviour change, and you just feel supported in that journey through care and treatment.
Such an important conversation. We really appreciate you joining us, Sarah, to explain it. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
That was Dr. Sarah Trobe, clinical psychologist and the National Director of the National Eating Disorders Collaboration. And if you're looking for more information or support about ARFID, you can call the Butterfly Foundation helpline, and that number is 1800 33 4673, or head to butterfly.org.au. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'll be back tomorrow with the weekend briefing, and on tomorrow's episode, Antoinette speaks to journalist Tim Elliott about new series Secrets We Keep Jailbreak and the amazing story of fugitive Darko Desic, who spent 30 years on the run.
He initially didn't want to talk to anybody after he handed himself in 2021. It took me 2.5 years to track him down because he was basically living at a secret location in rural New South Wales, trying to get away from media, trying to get away from the press. He just wanted to be alone. It took me that long to find him, and then probably another half a year to convince him to talk to me.
We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. See you next time.